Welcome to the Kuadrant community call. I have an echo. I start again. Welcome to the Kuadrant community call, February the 11th, 2025. We have some items on the agenda. There's still an echo. Go for it, Craig.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd share some of the work we've been progressing around using core DNS to do the DNS integration. So I suppose background to that is that not everybody uses cloud providers for DNS, and there are many on-premise DNS servers. And we want to be able to try and support them and offer the DNS feature set to those types of users as well. So the idea is to leverage core DNS to do as a DNS server to do that. So core DNS is a Go project. It's used in Kubernetes for DNS. It's used in various places, but the main thing is you can actually build plugins for it, and so you can program the DNS that it using these plugins. So it will basically like a bit like HTTP middleware. It will kind of pass through your plugins if you configure them, and then you can decide what to do with the DNS response. So we started that, and we needed to try and figure out a few things about how it would work. And we've started to scope out now like an initial preview version or alpha version. I'm not sure what the right term for it really is. Something that you could stand up and get some basic functionality out of. And I was just going to share some of the details about that. There's a lot of details in that issue that I shared, but if it's okay, I can share the screen for a second, Thomas, and not share my email. Is that okay? Can I share?
Sure, go.
Okay. Oh, I can't present. Why can't I present? Okay, yeah, okay. Let's see, entire screen. Let's go for this and see how this goes. So this is like a diagram trying to show how it would work. It's a sketch, so there may be some errors here, but it's mostly all there. So we have like two clusters here. We have our existing interaction with Kuadrant operator, DNS policy, DNS records, and the DNS provider secret and the gateway. That's like all existing functionality. And then what we're hoping to add here is that the DNS operator will leverage a new provider type, so core DNS. And in that provider type will be a list of other core DNSs that are deployed on other clusters. That's how we're doing it for the initial version. It doesn't have to be that way long term. Something we were thinking about was possibly sourcing those from the Edge DNS server, but for now, we'll just add it as a list there. And the DNS operator then will effectively copy this record into what I've named here the merged copy. So what that is the same record set, but it has an additional record set with some well-known prefixes or subdomains, which is just the record set for this cluster. And then the DNS operator, because it knows about the other DNS servers, will do a dig with those well-known subdomains and get back the list of records from this server and merge them into a single record. And this one, same on this side, would take this one and get a merged set of records here. So each core DNS would have the full record set for all clusters that at least are listed in the provider secret. Then that would mean that in your Edge DNS server, so wherever that might be, you could create a zone delegation. So you would delegate a zone to these core DNS servers. And when a query came in for api.example.com, it would hit one of these, and it would have the full record set to be able to give you a DNS response. So that's one part of it. The other part is that obviously with the functionality we currently have, we provide geo-based DNS response and weighted DNS response. So in order to achieve that, we're looking at adding a plugin to Core DNS, which is one of the useful things with Core DNS, that will source the record from this resource type, but then will apply the Kuadrant plugin, which will be part of Core DNS, and that record set will filter through that plugin and then apply geo or weighting based on the logic in that plugin. In order to do geo, it would still need an external geo database, like a Maxmind database, but it would allow us to replicate the logic and the functionality that we have in the other providers. So then, obviously, when your request comes through, it will source from here, run through the plugin, and give you the response based on your DNS policy. Ultimately, your DNS policy is the thing that's going to dictate how that response should come. So yeah, I guess that's like a high level overview. And I was going to, just for the sake of interest, show a quick demo of the piece that has been very roughly scoped out is actually querying these DNS servers. So if I open up my terminal, so in this, let me just close that. Sorry, there was another one blocking my main screen. So we have two core DNS servers running on a local client cluster. And if we get our namespaces here, we have Kuadrant core DNS and Kuadrant DNS. Again, this is really just proof of concept spike stuff. And if we get our deployments, we'll see core DNS. So we have core DNS. Oh, that's the kube system one, sorry. This one and this one. And if we get the services, we'll see that there is a service in front of each of these. I'll just get one for now, just for briefness. Oops. So we have one with an external IP that's been exposed here, and it's listed on port 53. And then if we get the provider secret, if I can remember which namespace I put that in. I think it was in here. Yeah. So with the core DNS secret, this is going to be base 64 encoded, but we have a key here of name servers, which is provided to the DNS controller. So in this tab, we have the wait, I've got one more thing to show. So if I show, currently we don't have a plugin sourcing the actual records from like the DNS record resource. So in order to kind of prove the concept, I use the file-based record system from Core DNS, which comes as standard. So if we get the config map and same namespace. You'll see what I mean by the record set here. So here's our zone. And we can see that it's got a W dot, which is the weight, what weight should be applied, and a D, which is the default geo. This is just a concept, just bear that in mind, but any feedback is welcome. And then M dot, which is like mine, as in my record dot. So this goes to the KLB, and so does api.example.com. So when it's all grouped together, There's another record set. Maybe I could show that as well. Yeah. So the other record set then we can see is going to cluster 2, just to show that it's different really. And then it's going to a CNAME ultimately, which is like, for example, like a AWS load balancer, whereas the other one was going to an IP. So they're both running. One is running here, and one is running here. And they have those IP addresses, which we've added as name servers into the core DNS provider secret. So now when we run the DNS operator, we can show it getting those responses and understanding where they come from, which it could then merge together into a single record. I don't have that merging done yet, just in case you're expecting that part. So we see that they both got hit, and then we can see that we got an answer from this, and it's given us the record set to end up with this A record, and then for this second name server, we're get the full record set again, which ends up with the CNAME to some load balancer somewhere. So the idea then is that those two record sets would be merged into a single record set for api.example.com. And then that would be run through the plugins, which would give you the weighting and the geo. That's my demo. There's still quite a bit to figure out here, but it's the start. So what we're hoping is we can plan out and scope out something that we could deliver within the next sprint, and something that you could actually try. It might not have all the features yet, right? It might not have all the geo and the weighting. Maybe it just serves back a set of records and nothing else at that point. And then in the next sprint, build on that again to add in like geo and weighting, again, depending on how much work we figure out is in all of that. But that's the plan. So yeah, any comments or feedback? Am I still sharing my screen? No. Okay. Thomas?
Yeah. What does this mean for somebody who's already using core DNS? Like what do they have to change in the way they are using it?
So there's two options really. One is like they could install another instance of core DNS, which would be the one that has our plugin compiled into it. So core DNS, you have to compile the plugin into the core DNS instance. So they could stand up a new instance, like maybe we provide an image that they could be running, and then that could be the DNS server that they point their record set at, or their zone at. So, you'd have the one for the cluster, and then you'd have like one for Kuadrant, right? Or they could take the plugin and compile it into their own instance of core DNS and run it themselves that way also, if that's what they wanted to do. Maybe they've got a lot of plugins that are compiling into core DNS, and they take our plugin and compile it into their own instance of core DNS and then use it that way, right? So, but one piece that I missed on the plugins, just before I go to Guy, is for each zone that you define, I forgot to show it here, but for each zone that you define, you can define which plugins should be used with that zone. So like if they have their own set of plugins for one particular zone, adding our plugin won't interfere with that. Like they can then not use that with their other zones and just use it with zones that they're going to delegate to us.
Sorry, one more thing. And zone is like a collection of records. How do I see zone? Where is that sit?
Yeah, it's a collection of records under a specific DNS name, I guess.
You mentioned, Craig, for the geo stuff, that we would need to integrate with a remote service. Is it too much of a crazy idea maybe to provide one ourselves, even if it's only for people to kick off things and get them up and running. And I'm thinking on a local service, a service that could run inside of the same cluster rather than going to a remote one.
Okay, you mean like the what the external DNS the edge DNS provider, that piece?
Yeah, I mean the gel stuff, the one that the gel database for resolving to IPs to locations.
Oh,
You mentioned that you need to integrate
yes,
with an
yes,
external one, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we haven't gone too far down the route of looking for other geo databases or how we could integrate with those yet. But yeah, that's a good question. I think we probably should see if there's one that we could use that maybe is of a similar format or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are usually relatively small databases, so not too big. So it's relatively the hard part is to maintain the database, right?
Mm.
So I'm thinking on something that can work out for maybe for demo or to start things up, right? But not necessarily for the long term. In fact, I think that we do have some at least one guide that I can remember in the Arduino repo where we use one of those, and in the Arduino examples repo we have a service that does that, for demos purpose only.
Okay. Yeah, I think that
obviously I think it's something better than that, but just an idea.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a barrier, which is a bit unfortunate, but it's also kind of, yeah, for real use, it's you're gonna have to go get the right database. But yeah, I think it does make sense to see, is there something that we could use that would make it easier for people that has the right licensing, that we can do that without getting in trouble, right? Yeah, I'll take a note of that. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Craig. No, I'm still sharing my screen, but it's just one of the tabs. How do I get back to having it big? I don't know. Resume, yes. Okay. Okay. Back to the topics. Alex, OpenID Connect policy proposal. Boom. Go.
Can you follow that link? Thank you. So can you scroll down maybe to the guide level explanation, then the minimal example? Exactly. I think that is it. So I tried to come up with something to do the flip side of what Adam showcased last week, which is letting somebody identify themselves as through an OpenID provider somewhere. So I looked into a few. I decided I'll use GitLab as one way to do it. And that is sort of the minimal thing that I could come up with. So as you can see, you do just provide the host where the provider sits and your credential, in that case, like the client ID, and that's all you would need to do. In order to not implement like a complete OpenIDC, whatever the flow is, because one thing that we have never done is dealing with the token exchange based on the access code. Hopefully I'm using all the right words, because like that's totally not my thing. But so if I get stuff wrong, at least it's not recorded on the internet. So much on that. So we never did anything to help users with that bit, even though, as Guy pointed me to like an issue somewhere, there's quite a few people that would actually love that. So I tried to not be dismissive of that though. So this effectively uses many defaults behind the scene. So now if you scroll down to the complete OpenID Connect policy part, that's actually more of the things that it needs in order to do its work. There's just many things to which I either default or I infer. So in case you're like me and don't know nothing about Open Identity Connect, there is actually this. So if you find the provider bit, there is host, and then there is the discovery endpoint. That's actually sort of a default thing to query to find a bunch of information, and literally a whole lot of information about what the provider provides, I guess, and or needs, and where its endpoints are, and so forth. So the one we really need in this case is the one right below, is the authorization endpoint. So you didn't need to specify that, like automatically because of your host, it's going to use HTTPS. I think actually HTTPS is not an option, but again, I could be wrong. I think everything needs to have, well, maybe for that well-known thing, it's fine. But many times, based on what I think I understood, like OpenID Connect requires SSL, like HTTPS. So anyways, so default to that, we'll go hit that endpoint, figure out the authorization endpoint. That's the place where you want to redirect the users in order to get an access code for the flow. So all that would sort of be inferred. The next part right underneath of it, which is the authorization endpoint payload, is the things that we need to send alongside alongside that request to the authorization endpoint for that to recognize you, right? It seems to be fairly standard. There's just one thing that I decided is the hard-coded bit at the end of the redirect URI that you see there at the end. It's just me that decided it's one that I like. The scope is actually part of the spec. There's certain things that you can ask there, and OpenID is one that should be supported, as far as I understood, by everyone. Response type is code. That's the authorization code that we're looking for, and so forth. There's more things that I added down there that we don't use in this flow that I'm literally right now trying to wire end to end to do all of this. There's more stuff that we don't need as well, and the credentials that you see down there, like the client secret, that GitHub nicely thinks I leaked. But sorry, internet, this is all just made up characters, so they probably don't map to anything. Knock on wood. And they're just whatever. So yeah, and what else? Yeah. And then the last bit is the client secret we would need if we would do the entire token exchange, if we would do the if we would hit the what is it? The token endpoint, yeah, I guess. Oh, I didn't put the user one in there because probably I wanted to keep this lightweight for now. I don't even know that the other ones need to be there per se. The one we really need is the jogs URI, which is the key sets that we will need in order to validate the token when the request comes back inside the cluster later. So the redirect URI that you see there is also, we also try to, oh, that should be deleted, I realize, right? Oh, no, maybe not. No, it shouldn't. It's fine. So anyways, the one that we send to the payload is we try to figure out what domain is wired to your gateway and so forth. This can only work in certain cases. So this default that you saw there will work for a very simple use case. But if you start routing traffic through 3 different gateways, or the gateway that you link to is actually not the one and so forth, could be we guessed this all wrong, right? But again, this can all be overwritten. What else? Sorry, Guy, I'm trying to quickly scan if I covered what I wanted to cover. Yes, there's a bunch of things that are implied here, but I'll get back to them in a sec. Yeah, okay, sure, Guy. Shoot.
I'll make sure to drop in some comments what I'm about to say here, but in case I forget, on the top of my head, a couple of things that I found interesting there, especially if we decide to do the token exchange part, right? Or not the token exchange, the token part of the authorization code flow, right? That's what I mean. So obtaining the token. So the second part. I'm not entirely sure, but we may need another one, the same way we have the authorization endpoint payload. We may need a similar one for the token endpoint as well.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
But I'm gonna cut you off there because, sorry, I'm gonna put it bluntly, but I don't care because we're not doing this right now. So this is not, again, just to be very clear about what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to boil the ocean, right? This is not supposed to solve all the problems. It's supposed to have all the hooks. Oh, there's a thing that apparently I missed somewhere that I was. Oh, no. Yeah. Can you scroll down again? Sorry. Yes. So one thing that I skipped is right above the provider, which is I decided to name it token source. This right now is where the flow is supposed to understand where the token is going to be obtained from. So I named this one authorization header, which is effectively I expect to get a header as a request with the token in it from the client. If we change that, this thing would take another enum value, magic value, right, to something else, like, I don't know, Authorino, or, and maybe like, I much rather like go on forever on the naming than how we then solve doing what you're describing there. But that was the token source is the way that I was thinking that we make that support different. I won't say flows, but do you get what I mean? Like handling the flow, where responsibility within the flow lies with different actors in the flow. Did that make sense?
Not entirely.
So here's what the thing that I started hacking first, and now I'm actually trying to write a proper web app. Mistakes I do in life. To actually do this is the client, in this case, maybe I should explain some of that actually Guy knows, but may not be clear to others. So when you do demos with curl and whatever, it's all nice and good, but this is not trying to solve that. This is trying to solve, like, I don't know how they're called, but like a stateful client-side one-page app or whatever thing. That will be the one that gets unauthorized from the server, right? Like from the thing it talks to, right? Let's not talk about Kuadrant, whatever, I don't care. It gets unauthorized, goes to the authorization server that we could tell it about from the service side, right? Goes to GitLab, authorizes the user, go fetch the token, does the complete token exchange, and then talks back to the app server, I'm gonna call it, providing that token. That token gets validated against the key set that we got from the authorization thing. And that's all that happens. So Guy left a comment somewhere in there. I'm surprised it doesn't appear there, but probably because of the view or whatever. So yes, hopefully this thing can be like add more tweaks, right, to support authorization, right? What this does, effectively, the implied logic that you don't see explained anywhere here is anybody unauthenticated is not authorized, and somebody authenticated is authorized. That's it. You don't have more control than that, right? So if you want to do finer grained stuff, that you can't achieve this with this as of this proposal. And I insist on the alpha 1 state, V1 alpha 1, right? So this is, I'm not saying like it needs to remain that way. We can expand it to support more use cases, right? You need to, a little bit like what Adam showed in in last week's call, where maybe you can put like a function in there that would, let's say, the email needs to also be verified, for instance, right? And then we can go on, like, what are we doing? ACL, like, I don't know. And I don't want to necessarily have all of everything like access control list support in there necessarily, but how can we expand that to then support that? Even if that means, well, you got started with this generated the auth config, and now you need to drill down into the auth config, understand how you wire all this together. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer for now, and maybe it'll change in the future. Like, I don't know. But I'm not trying to solve everything all at once. But that's back to your question now, Guy. Like, the way that I was thinking of making that further configurable is by changing this field to some other magic constant value that for now would, yeah, I don't think I documented that because I don't know. Yeah, we could do it, but he and I discussed that 2 weeks ago, I think. The other thing we could do is get it from a cookie instead of getting it from the authorization header. Same thing. You would go change that to, can you scroll down again? Sorry, to a little further. Yeah, thank you. Token source cookie foobar. I don't know. Yeah, Guski. Sorry, I don't know if I addressed, if you had more, Guy, just re-raise your hand.
Yeah, Guy, you want to ask anything else?
No, go ahead, Agus. No worries.
Yes, just wanted to clarify if this fits in my mindset. So what's the idea here? How is this policy landing in the data plane? This is something that ends up in some authorization policy. So it's Authorino the one validating those tokens, and then we have this information for rate limiting purposes or whatever other policies we want to implement, or how is this?
Okay, so it's a meta policy, so it does nothing other than spit out resources that we know of. So it could spit out, like, I don't know, rate limiting policy and limit everybody to 0, which really means you don't get access to this. Like, that's not the way I plan to do this. So this will probably transform into, well, so I have nothing that supports that, right? So what I have is the auth config, actually, because I want to avoid having too much crap. But so this would output an auth policy that eventually will output the auth config, as you know it from now, right? That would enforce that. And to answer a little more, yes. So if you use this one or the one you saw above, which are effectively the same, it's just that's what the user would provide. Yes. So what would happen on the data plane is it would hit Authorino. There's a few acts in order to have some endpoints possibly be authorized for anonymous and whatever, but in order to do redirects and other things. But then for say like protected routes, I'm gonna call it, right? The way that it will work, yes, all that Authorino does is validates the token against the key set it got from the provider. I think
Sorry, I dropped for a while. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that aligns what we had in mind. Thank you.
I'm just going to talk. So both of these are examples of an OpenID Connect policy, right? or are they? It's not clear to me if the second one is created behind the scenes from the first one.
No, 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 no. Like if you look at the kind, they're the same. It's just
Exactly.
the one above emits fields that you don't need to specify. So let me scroll down a little bit. So example given like the authorization endpoint, right? The place where you want the app to possibly redirect to, we don't need to have that because we can infer it from the discovery endpoint, which turns out itself, it looks like it's specified, but I still put it there so you can still override it if you want to source that information from some other place, right? All that can be inferred from only host:/gitlab.com.
Right.
That's
Oh,
all I need.
Right. So it's not that like the first time I understood it like that this one would generate that one. No.
No.
It's like
Well,
you can choose to
well, you could
in code-
arguably be very like again anal about wording. Yeah, the one above will result into the lower one, but they're the same.
yes, and
it's
then
defaults.
editing the lower one, what would happen then?
Sorry, what? No, they're the
Let's
same.
say
There is only
yes.
one. I mean, look at the.
Right.
It's yeah,
Yes.
they're the same. It's
Yes,
this API version, kind, metadata name. They're the same.
Right. Yes. Top one is required fields. Yeah. Okay. I get it. Yes. Okay. And what it actually gets converted to is the auth policy in this case, for example, and that's being used in the data plane.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Right. So we even within a meta policy, you can see you have a world like you can have this example show this and somebody says, oh, that's easy, or I get that. Oh, I have my client ID here, I can use this. And then somebody else who says, well, I want to have more control, they can also find their way there.
Yeah.
That's
I think the only surprising thing for somebody with, and again, since I'm no expert, I don't know, but I looked into multiple providers. I looked into multiple client libraries in different languages, including Ruby, to do those kind of things. I don't think any of the wording there is surprising. The one thing that I think is surprising, and I'm actually surprised nobody mentioned it so far, is the query part, the client ID, all the wording that's there is cell. There are cell expressions. And actually, I wasn't desperate, but it's like when people that get easy and simple wrong all the time are very much present in the Ruby community, but I think they get easy right many times. And as such, I appreciate their input. And that's what I was looking for. So I can see that being, like the scope and response type needing to, like you need to specify it like that, right? Because YAML and so forth, right? So that's a bit crappy, right? Again, scope, well, though arguably scope, even that you could probably want to change. Yeah, anyways, though you could argue scope and response type could made to not be cell, but I went for simple. Everything below query is actually not specified. It's a dictionary of keys to values, and the values are cell expression, so I don't know what they are, right? You can put whatever you want. Though I could argue scope and response type, I could make them different because scope certainly like is part of the spec. Response type, I'm unsure, but I think it is as well. But now if somebody would want to have response uppercase T, camel casing that thing instead of snake casing it inside the query thing, then we would lose that. So I went for simple, which in this case I would argue is maybe not easy, but it is the simplest solution.
Just to be clear, if it wasn't before, in order to fill those defaults that the example on the bottom show compared to the the one on the top, there's at least one request to an external service involved, meaning that that's not the kind of thing we can enforce now at the level of the API server when defining this particular CRD, right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
that
yeah,
means
yeah.
that there's an actual piece that needs to go, send a request to
Well,
an ATP service. The
unspecified, right? Like, yeah, the API server. No, you're right. But yeah, unspecified who does that request, right? Should it fall into
Mhm.
like one of the
although arguably, although arguably it could be a mutating webhook that does that, right?
Yeah. Well, again, like as I'm saying, I'm cheating, right? Because I'm implementing this manually, if you want. Like nothing does that. I do it and I create the auth config that I want to get from that to make sure that sort of my stuff works. But then there's many questions to answer, like, do we want to do it that way? Do it like the sales stuff that I just mentioned? Do you want to move that? Like which ones do you infer? Who does the request to the discovery endpoint? Yeah, it could be like, what is it? Admitting webhook or whatever? No, whatever the one is.
Yeah.
So, and I've spent no time at all looking into that, right? Soon as I know that I can map it, if you want, on paper from that to that, and that the latter actually works in my proof of concept, I mean, the work's quote unquote done, right? All that needs to be done then is banging on the keyboard. But yes, like this is why I left the implementation section like work in progress. And how we want to go about is yet again a different thing. One thing that I wanted to add, a thing I want to do then is try to port that to other OIDC providers once we have it, in order to possibly grow the list of authorization endpoint payload, for instance, right? And that we infer more. Did I test this? If I remember right, I tested it. GitLab, if I send it other crap, it just ignores it, right? So for as long as we don't send a query string that's too long, I don't remember what the limit on that is. Like we should be able to support, say, any, well, let's say many, let me put it that way, OpenID providers without forcing people to go tweak those details initially. Thomas.
Yeah, I'm wondering, it would be interesting to see what auth policy or auth config this results into, to see them next to each other, to see where's the,
Why?
is there any, like, is the, trying to pick the right words here, of course, but when I fail miserably, is it actually a simpler policy layer? Is there a need for a layer? Is there a difference? Like, if
Well,
it
I
looks
think there is one in the wording. So if you look
Right.
at the,
That's why
I
I'm
think
interested.
there's the goals. I mean, maybe you want to read the whole doc or not. I don't know.
Yes,
But one
I
of the
will.
goals, again, for meta policies in general is cannot be reached with Authorino. Authorino has a domain-specific language, right? As I'm not picking on Authorino, just to be clear, but Authorino like leaks literally its types to the auth config, right? So, sorry, to the auth policy. So that's what you get exposed to, right? So somebody needs to think, if at all, in terms of auth pipeline, right? I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, and it's a bad assumption on my end, but I expect that most people trying to implement this OpenIDC flow don't know about an auth pipeline or Authorino's auth pipeline, because I think it is opinionated, but maybe I'm wrong again. So as such, that's one of the goals, right? Again, if you scroll up, host, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you want to change it to something else, I'm more than happy to do so if it makes it clearer. And client ID is actually not my thing. Like that actually comes literally from my OpenID Connect stuff.
No, I agree.
So
Yes.
no wording there. Well, the most specific wording you get is the API version and the kind. right? All the rest is not coming. Now, if you scroll down, that remains pretty much the same, other than token source that you will need to read some doc about. And the query part, the cell stuff, right? Yeah, you need, so if you know cell, you're good. But if you don't, well, then there is that. For the rest, again, somebody corrects me if I'm wrong, I think none of it is sourced from our domain, right? It comes from the OpenID Connect domain. And yeah, anyways, I rest my case.
Yeah,
I would say. And then I would add another thing. When I said why, what would you want to compare? There is no commitment that a given OpenID Connect policy gives you enough config of any given kind. Guy hinted to that in the question he asked on the thing, on that PR that I don't know why we don't see it. But he asked if you want to push and correct me if I'm misquoting you there, Guy, right? But he asked whether like we would want to push the authorization a little further than just, oh, that person is authenticated, yes or no. And I think one of the things that he said, maybe have another policy for that, or maybe I dreamt of that thing, but right. You can yeah, it's the one below, right? Maybe so point being that I think one of the advantage of this is they become composable. An auth config is not composable.
Yeah. What I was thinking is, I wasn't thinking on linking to this new kind of resource, anything related to authorization at all. If anything, only as you hinted yourself, maybe a flag for the user to control whether one could compose authorization into it by defining another policy, but in this case, an actual auth policy, right? Because I can see how you could create no IDC policy for the authentication part, as simple as the one that you showed, first. And then if you want to add an authorization piece, you could still define an authorization policy only with the authorization part, and that let those two be composed into one by using, the merge strategy.
Right. Totally. So again, I'm like, yes, not against it, but out of scope for this initial thing. And sorry, I don't want to like be dismissive or whatever, but I'm trying to have this sort of like at least this PR focused on that, on solving that problem, right? And I'm not. That being said, I think we need to be careful in the API that we specify in order to keep it open for growth, right? Whatever we want to then add in there, like that's where actually I spend most of my time, and I probably failed. So if you see stuff, I'd be thankful for pointing those out.
I will read through it. It's interesting. Any other questions? Dismissive remarks? Something with the word simple in it, maybe? Okay. Leave it here. And there was another thing, I think. I'm not sure if we have enough time for that key. All right, this is just asking for reviews, right?
Yeah, that one's going to be very quick, actually. Just before 5 a.m. in the morning, I sent this pull request, and since then, my day has basically been pinging people and letting them know about it, as if they wouldn't receive a notification from GitHub already, right? So, just doing the same here, raising awareness about this pull request. It's a big one, very important to us, and so people may want to check that out. That's it.
Super. Thank you. Maybe one more thing to say. After in 7 minutes, there's the Gateway API call European friendly time, I believe. Thanks everybody who put all this work in it. It's hours of thinking that has been triggered now. Unless there are any other questions, I want to leave it here. 7 minutes left. Okay. Thank you. Bye.